Yes, sir. Can we start? Like,
Okay, thank you. Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Vijay ma'am, for giving this particular opportunity. I also thank other organizations, Institute of Science and Management, and Fine Rate Consultant, and especially Study Leaf. It was owned by the Dr. Vijaya. Thank you,
so
ma'am, once again for giving this opportunity. And I welcome all the participants as a part of 7 days virtual FDP on quantitative data analysis using JAMOVI. So from today, we are going to have next 7 days faculty development program on quantitative data analysis using JAMOVI. I'm sure many of you might be knowing how to use SPSS. And as when it comes to the JAMOVI, it is a completely free and open source software. So I'll be talking about it. What is JAMOVI from tomorrow onwards? Now, today we are going to have basic understanding of what is hypothesis, how to frame hypothesis, how to test hypothesis, and what are the different levels of measurement one should consider while framing the hypothesis, or maybe as a part of data collection, one should consider it. What are the data that we have it? When it comes to choosing any kind of statistical technique, one should have some kind of understanding about different levels of measurement. So as a part of today's session, we are going to talk about levels of measurement. And lastly, I'm also going to discuss about how one can choose right statistical test for hypothesis. The main objective of today's session is to give the overview of basic understanding of hypothesis. So by having basic understanding about today's session, it is going to help you from tomorrow onwards in order to conduct various statistical tests. So that is the main objective of today's session. I would like to express my sincere thanks to all the academicians, all the scholars. I have referred various contributors to their work, even 1 or 2 images from their presentations. The slides that I have used, 1 or 2 images, that is definitely is going to help the participants. So this is the intention of using their work as a part of this particular session is going to help you more in clarity. So this outline, concept of research, what is hypothesis, how one can link theory, hypothesis, and research questions, features and importance and sources of hypothesis, what are the different types of hypothesis one can frame, how we are going to define various variables, how we are going to choose statistical test. Okay. Now, I can see from the participants, we have professors, research scholars. Most of them are professors. I'm sure many of you might be knowing what I'm going to cover today. But at least the scholars, those are at the stage of early career, definitely is going to add value to them. The professors, those having understanding about it, feel free to add it. Okay, I'm sure you can add better than me sometimes. We are all learning it. We are in the learning process. So feel free to add it, whatever you feel it at the end of the session. Okay. So I'll be more happy that it can be go in two-way session, two-way. Okay. Now coming to the concept of research, there are so many definitions. It depends on the academic background that you're coming in. Some of you are coming from sociology, social work, education, in general, social science, management. So we have gone through various definitions given by various scholars. But in general, if you look at what is meant by research, research is a careful and systematized effort of gaining new knowledge. Today, we are living in information world. We are living in information society. Having information is nothing but having more wealth. You are going to contribute in terms of your wealth. You are going to gain more profits. It can be profits. It can be maximizing your profits. It can be making you more comfortable. It may be making like improving current situation. So we all doing research in one or the other way in our day-to-day life. Without research, there is no development. Without research, there is no innovation. Without research, we can't think of anything further. We are all doing research in our day-to-day life in one or the other way. But what is it meant by research? Research is a careful and systematized effort of gaining knowledge. Now, if you talk with any layman point of view, for example, if you talk with master degree students, ML students, or those are in the PhD proposal writing, if you ask what is research, They tell that I'm using survey method, I'm using focus group discussion. This is what my survey is all about. Research is not just what kind of method, survey method or interview method that you're using it. The research is a careful, systematized effort. Means starting with what is your philosophy of the research. So we have concept called research onion, which I'm going to discuss in coming slide. Now we have few more definitions. Research comprises of defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, collecting, organizing, and evaluating data, making deductions, researching conclusions. Now, research is meant for different purposes. For some people, research is nothing but they want to add some contribution in the existing knowledge. For some people, research is nothing but coming with some kind of solution. What are the problems they are trying to study? They want to address it. Some people wanted to bring some kind of policy. Some people wanted to bring some kind of new legislations. So research depends on the purpose of the study. So what is your purpose of conducting this particular study? Are you going to fill the gap? Are you going to test the theory? Or you want to develop the theory? So one can able to see based on the purpose of the study, one can start the research. So as a scholar, somebody can say that I want to get a doctorate degree. That's why I'm doing research. Nothing wrong. We are all academicians. At the end of the day, we have to accept it. Without having PhD, you may find some difficulties with regard to your promotions, with regard to your increments, with regard to your status. Obviously, there is one of the important reason. But other way, if you look at it, research is meant for coming with some solutions, the problem that you're trying to address. Research is for something you're trying to test the theories, or you want to develop the theories, or you want to alter the existing theories. So basically, it is a careful and systemized effort to gain the new knowledge. Okay, one of the simplest way one can able to do that part. Now, as I mentioned it, as a researcher, it's not about I'm using survey method. It's not about I'm using focus group discussion. What kind of knowledge that you're going to contribute? I'm not going to discuss in detail, but I would like to introduce some concepts. If there are any questions, maybe later on, we can discuss it in detail about what is meant by research onion is all about it. But at the same time, I also wanted to highlight why, as a researcher, one should consider to apply research onion as a part of your research topic. As a research, your PhD thesis or MPhil dissertation, whatever you do it. Having understanding about research onion is going to help you in terms of what are the steps one has to follow. Instead of simply jumping, I'm going to use interview method, focus group discussion. Why you are conducting research? What kind of knowledge that you're going to contribute? In research, we have different kind of philosophies like positivism, interpretivism, pragmatism. From the layman point of view, if you look at it, positivism means, as a researcher, whatever you're able to observe it, according to you, there is a knowledge is because you're able to observe it. It is your contributing knowledge because you're able to test it. So according to positivist, whatever you're able to sense it, whatever you're able to test it, whatever you're able to measure it, you are saying that this is knowledge. Means it is based on objectivity. It is based on objectivity. Whereas when it comes to the interpretist, they say that knowledge is based on subjectivity. For example, if you take the example of the person who is affected with HIV/AIDS, or you can take the example of the person who is affected with breast cancer. Now, let's take the example of second one. There are 3 young women before the age of 35 years of group. They are affected with breast cancer. Now, I just want to understand how they are coping with this particular phenomena. All the 3 are young ladies. They are below 35 years of age group. Their experience is completely different. Depends on their socio-economic background. Depends on the kind of support they are getting their husbands. Because as a wife, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter-in-law, as an employee of the organization, as a neighbor, so you're going to interact with the society. You are going to have day-to-day experiences with the surrounding environment. The kind of interaction that you're going to have it. It is going to influence the kind of experiences that you're going to have it. So how we are going to cope with this particular phenomena? As a part of interpretist philosophy, knowledge we are contributing on the basis of subjectivity. means there are multiple realities we have it. Whereas when it comes to positivist ideology, we're having objectivity based. Reality is a single reality. So I'm just giving the overview. If there are any kind of discussions take place, I'll answer more on it. Last 15-20 minutes, we are going to have complete open question and answer session. We are going to have it. Okay. Now, when it comes to the pragmatistic, whenever as a researcher, if you feel that just applying one quantitative methodology, you're not able to justify. If you feel that just applying quantitative methodology or qualitative methodology, you're not able to justify your research questions or research objectives, one can go with pragmatistic approach. In between, there are so many philosophies. We have critical realism, criticalism, realism. There are so objectivism. There are so many philosophies we have it. But overall, I'm just giving a simple template. Okay. Now, if somebody is following, imagine that somebody is following positivist approach. They have to adopt deductive approach to theory development. Basically, they are going to conduct quantitative research. But if somebody is applying interpretivist approach, they have to go with qualitative research. But if somebody is applying pragmatistic approach, they can go with a combination of both quantitative and qualitative. We have various designs in the mixed methodology, like concurrent descriptive concurrent mixed methods, parallel mixed method research, integrated mixed methodology research. There are so many names like exploratory sequential mixed methodologies. So it depends on how much you are going to explore it. Okay. I hope I'm not going very fast. Let me make it a little bit slow. If somebody is following positivist approach, obviously they are going to follow deductive approach, that is quantitative approach, they are going to follow it. Okay. I'll explain what is meant by inductive, deductive. Now, I have chosen positivist. I'm going to choose deductive approach to theory development. Then it is going to be quantitative. Then it can be survey. It can be experimental. So every layer is depend on other layer. The main objective that I want to highlight as a part of this particular slide is that research is a systematic, careful and systematized effort of gaining new knowledge. Means if you want to say that research is systematized effort, if I am choosing for positivist approach, I cannot go for inductive methodology. I can't go with ethnography or grounded theory approach. There is obvious in case if you're choosing for mixed methodology research, obviously one can go with both quantitative and qualitative. So this having understanding about research onion, it is going to help you. What are the steps one has to carry step by step? Okay, so you can also correct it. How you are traveling in the process of research journey. What kind of methods that you have chosen it? What can be the next layer? What can be the next layer? So you can justify which philosophy that you had adopted, in what way that you are going to contribute it. Okay, in that way, this particular research onion is going to help. This particular concept was given by Professor Sundar in the year 2006, and so many times it was updated as on 2015. So this is the current template of research onion. After finishing this particular session, I'm going to share with you all a Google Drive link where I'll be giving day-wise reading material as well as recorded sessions and PPT. With regard to recorded session, Vijay madam is going to share maybe today or tomorrow. Whenever it's possible, she is going to share. From my side, I'll be sharing the reading material as well as the data sets, sample data sets with you all. Before coming for tomorrow's session, please ensure that you start downloading the data sets so that you can practice it. I have one more request. I request all the participants, if possible, please join with your laptop or PC so that from tomorrow, we are going to have hands-on practice, if it is possible, because we are all going to use JAMOVI. It is a completely open and free source software. So you can install it, you can uninstall it a number of times. Okay. Now, I just want to highlight a little bit about various methodological choices. Depends on which university that you are coming at. There is some kind of domination from various scholars. Some scholars say that quantitative methodology is the best. Some scholars say that qualitative methodology is the best. There are also scholars says that no, mixed methodology is the best option. There is also mixed methodology research. But based on my limited experience, limited understanding, I can say that whether qualitative best or quantitative best, it depends on what kind of research objectives that you're trying to address, what kind of knowledge that you're trying to address. It's not that I'm good at statistics, I'll go for quantitative. It's not that I'm good at interpretation skills or English language, I'll go for qualitative. As a researcher, at the end of the day, we have to see what is the purpose of research that you're going to carry out. So based on that, you can take the call, what is the right choice for you, okay, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method research. I just want highlight one point from this particular slide. Thanks to the scholar Carpenter. There are two important points I want to highlight here. If you look at quantitative research, it is a linear process. Means you start defining the problem, you will explore existing literature. Based on your understanding of the existing theories, existing literature, you are going to frame hypothesis. And you'll conduct the study. As a researcher, you'll take utmost care. You'll also design pre-designed tool. You'll also conduct pilot study. As you're going to collect the data from the huge sample, you'll also look at the validity, reliability of your tool, because you can't go back and again collect the data from any of your respondents if you miss any of the data sets. Whereas when it comes to qualitative data, as you're going to collect the data from small sample, there is a possibility that you can go back and you can collect the data. It is completely based on cyclical research. It is based on cyclical research. At the time of writing your thesis, if you realize there is some gap, you can go back and again you can collect the data. But when it comes to quantitative data, it may not be easy. I'm not saying that you can't go back, but it may not be easy, just like qualitative research. So when you are conducting quantitative research, one has to be very careful. What are your research problems? What are the research objectives? What kind of research hypothesis that you have framed it? Whether you are able to justify your research tool as per the requirement of your research hypothesis and research objectives or not. So you start conducting pilot study, is testing your validity, reliability of tool. Once we get the confirmation, you go back to the field. That's why it is called linear approach. Whereas when it comes to qualitative, it is called cyclical approach. Now, before talking about hypothesis, as I mentioned it, the purpose of the study is developing the theory or testing the theory. As a scholar, what are the research that you're going to carry out? The main objective is developing the theory or testing the theory. Now, when you talk about approaches, we have two approaches: inductive approach, deductive approach. The scholar, those are doing inductive approach. Basically, they observe in the field. They'll observe different patterns, similarities and differences. They'll come up the theory based on the research. Basically, they carry exploratory research. If they find this particular domain is not explored, this particular research is not explored much, and they can come up with research. And they can frame the theory, or they can frame the hypothesis, they can come up with some assumptions, they can develop the theory out of it. As a part of qualitative research, we have phenomenological approach, grounded theory approach, ethnography, narrative approach. We have different kind of methodologies. We have autoethnography. We have different approaches. We have it as a part of qualitative research. Now, when it comes to the quantitative research, as you're going to use deductive research, based on your understanding about the existing research, you might have discovered some theories, or you might have come up with some conceptual understanding of various concepts. You start coming with some hypothesis, okay? And you're going to test this particular hypothesis, and you start looking at what kind of results that you're going to get it out. So there are two ways one can conduct the research. One is testing the hypothesis. Second one is developing the hypothesis, like testing the theory or developing the theory out of the research. Let me give a few examples. We have, when it comes to inductive research, it's very interesting research. I will be sharing with you all. I request all of you to please go through this particular article. title of the article is More Than Just a Punctuation Mark: How Boys and Young Men Learn About Menstruation. So this particular scholar, Catherine and Christine, they conducted a study in the year 2011. They wanted to understand how young boys can learn about menstruation. Now, this particular concept, menstruation, is not only Western context, even from Indian context, we have a lot of stigma is attached to that. Generally, we don't discuss about menstruation with our family members, with our, it may be sister, it may be our any of our lady members. We don't discuss. Even uttering the word menstruation is considered something bad in the family. You can't talk openly with your father. You can't discuss with your brother about menstruation. And it depends on the certain traditional families or conventional families. They consider it is as pollution. Even if you look at it from a sociological point of view or social theories point of view, purity, pollution, there are some concepts. So women considered as a polluted in a month, 3 to 5 days, they're not allowed to touch any of the stuff in their family. Now, this is from the general common happening here. But if you go to rural areas, those are coming from educational background. Most of the people conducting research, they're saying that in rural areas, we have high dropout rate among adolescents girls in rural areas. But what is the reason? As a girl, she knows her brother is going to city. While coming back from the work, if I ask, he can buy sanitary pads. But she can't openly discuss, brother, please buy sanitary pads for me. As a result, what happens is in rural areas, many of them are using various unhygienic practices. As a result, it is affecting their health and sanitary hygienic issues, skin diseases, a lot of issues are coming up. And you can see that it is going to have impact on their participation in economic and social activities, at least in terms of educational activities. Now, so that is completely different concept, the concept of menstruation. Now, the point that I want to highlight here is that the researcher couldn't find much articles. Catherine and Christine, they couldn't find much articles. There was no much research in this topic in the area of menstruation. So they want to understand what is happening to this particular phenomena. So they collected data from 23 young boys and men, and findings are very interesting. Many of the young boys and men learned about menstruation when they started dating for the first time, when they got into relations. Till the time, they are not knowing what is happening to women. As we all know that 50% of our total population belongs to women category. And we are not able to understand their problems, what is happening to these particular women. So findings are very interesting. The researcher conducted a study just because there was no any kind of research articles. There was no much contribution was there in the field. So the researcher gathered the study and able to develop the theory out of the findings. So this is the purpose of qualitative research. Whereas when it comes to deductive research, there are so many scholars, whether they're coming from education background, in general, social science background, or sociology of education. One can able to find a lot of articles, a lot of studies, classroom learning environment, and its impact on mental health of children's. Maybe at the school level, college level, university level, one can able to find a lot of articles, a lot of research studies, and one can also find a lot of theories talking about classroom learning environment, what kind of learning environment should be there, how it is going to have impact on mental health, starting from functionalist to structuralist, name it any scholar, whether it's sociology or educational scientist point of view. We have a lot of contribution. Now, this particular scholar, Melissa and Catherine, they wanted to understand what kind of classroom environment they have. They have taken two variables. One is classroom learning environment and its impact on mental health. So they want to test it. Basically, what is happening? How much extent this particular classroom environment is having impact on their mental health point of view. So they want to test the theories based on this particular topic. They have used deductive research. So what I want to say here is that as a researcher, the main objective of conducting research is whether you want to test the theory or you want to develop the theory, or it can be both the combination of it. I'm not able to see any of the participants here. If there are any questions, maybe before going to next, or if somebody would like to add any point, you can unmute yourself and can
unmute yourself if you
take it
wish.
out.
Sir, thanks for the nice session.
Please, sir,
Hello.
please.
Sir,
Go ahead,
is
sir, please.
deductive research is something like quantitative, right?
Yes, sir. It can be it's going to be quantitative.
Okay, sir.
If you are using mixed method research, it can be both. I mean, you can use both combination of inductive as well as deductive research. One can do that part. Okay. Any other question or anyone would like to add any point here? Shall we go ahead?
Sir, I think we should go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I'm sharing my screen. Science, 810. Okay. Now, other than these two articles, take any theory. For example, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Ahmad Sen concept of capability approach. One can apply this particular concept with reference to eradication of poverty, with reference to achieving sustainable development goal. Depends on the context that we have it. One can apply any particular theory and they can test it as a part of their fieldwork. Okay. So we have conducted a study. We have collected data from the denotified tribals in Banaskantha district. We have collected data from 200 women, denotified tribal women, who are considered as denotified tribals, that is born as criminals. So we have collected data to understand whether changes in occupational patterns having any kind of impact on their health-seeking behavior, whether it is having any kind of impact on their women's status. So findings were very interesting as a part of this particular study. And if somebody want to do it inductive research, for example, I have collected data from 3 social enterprises to understand how these particular social enterprises are contributing it. Based on the results, one can propose either you can develop the theory or you can propose the hypothesis. You can come up some kind of assumptions based on your findings that you got it. Okay. So this is all about approach to theory development, testing the development. Now I have simple questions. I'll talk about it. What is meant by research? It was a definition given by one of the scholars. One finds the truth by making hypothesis and comparing the truth to the hypothesis. Basically, hypothesis means a tentative assumption. As a researcher, you're starting your work. The main objective is to test it. What are the hypotheses that you have framed it? Now, the problem here is that most of the time, scholars, they used to write hypothesis in the form of paragraph. But hypothesis should be based on hypothesis should be in the form of statement. It should provide some kind of direction. Basically, hypothesis is going to help us. You're going to come up with some kind of prediction, some kind of assumption statement. That would be your outcome of your research work. That would be your outcome of research work. Having hypothesis is going to help us. What kind of scope of your study is going to be there? For example, as many of you might, some of your PhD scholars, any examiner, they can't grill you if they are not, if you are able to limit yourself, if you know the proper clarity of what kind of scope of your study is all about it. Hypothesis and research objectives is going to help us. What would be our scope of the study? What kind of you're able to control, you're able to ensure that this is my scope of the study, this is part of my research work, and this is out of the context. And it can also help you to not to collect unnecessary data. Means it is going to tell you what to collect, what not to collect it. It is also going to help you how you're going to design your research tool. It's also going to help you how you're going to design the tool, how you're going to report your findings, what kind of conclusion that you're going to make. What kind of conclusion sense? Conclusion with reference to the hypothesis that you have framed it. So instead of talking bullshit, you're going to directly talk to what was your hypothesis, what were results, what are the conclusions with reference to your research objectives. One important point here, as a researcher, one has to align their research title with the research objectives and research hypothesis and conclusion, findings and conclusion. If you're not able to see any kind of alignment, for example, your title is something, your research objectives are talking something, your research hypothesis something, and your research findings are something, and conclusion something. If there is any kind of deviation, if you see from these 3 to 4 steps, people may question you. It is going to have a lot of adverse effects on your awarding of degree. So as a researcher, what is your title? What are your research hypotheses? What are your research findings? What are your research conclusions? So are they aligned towards the same objectives or not? One has to say that. So framing hypothesis is going to help us to understand what kind of hypothesis that you're going to frame it up. Now somebody can question, sir, I'm doing qualitative research. Is it compulsory for me to frame hypothesis or not? Now I have a question to all the participants. Is it compulsory to have a hypothesis as a part of your research?
Yes, 100% true.
Yes, sir.
It is not necessary in certain circumstances.
Somebody saying 100%?
Yes, yes, sir. Without hypothesis, there is no research.
Without hypothesis, there is no research. Okay. Any other scholar?
What they want
Sir.
to prove.
No, sir.
I say that hypothesis is not mandatory.
Sir, in scientific research, it looks mandatory. But let us say you're doing some studies and accidentally you find something there. There may not be any hypothesis.
I'll put it like this. The people, those are doing qualitative research, they're not going to frame
Yes, sir.
hypothesis. It is not mandatory to frame hypothesis. Because you're not going to test any theories. You're not going to test any, you don't have any assumptions, right? If you have some kind of assumptions, you're not going to conduct any kind of qualitative research, right? So framing hypothesis, it is not mandatory for the qualitative researchers. That is the reason I mentioned inductive research, deductive research. As a scholar, the person who is using deductive research, you are going to test your hypothesis, you are going to test your theory. Whereas the qualitative researchers, they are going to develop the theory, they are going to develop the hypothesis. The outcome of the study is that you are going to come up with some theories, some assumptions as an outcome of your qualitative research work. So you're not going to have any kind of hypothesis as a part of qualitative research. If there are any arguments, I'm ready to take it out. Maybe we can discuss further later on also. Okay. Okay, next one. One more important step. Characteristics of a hypothesis. So we are going to discuss about hypothesis. Hypothesis should be must consist of 2 or more variables. It should be stated in the form of affirmatively. Can be tested with empirical evidence. Most useful when it makes a comparison. States how multiple variables are related. Theory underlying logic of relationship makes sense. Now, as a scholar, what are the hypotheses that you're going to frame? One has to keep these particular characteristics of the hypothesis. Point number 1, what are the hypotheses that you look at it? It should state the relationship between 2 or 3 different variables. It should be in the form of empirical evidence, means there should be scope for conducting test. And there should also scope for comparison. Okay. Now, I have a question to each one of you. Imagine yourself, all of you, don't mind it, don't take it personally. Imagine that you're working as a nutritionist in a particular zoo. You're working as a nutritionist in a zoo. One of your responsibility is to feed the monkeys. They are A, B, C, D monkeys. A, B, C, D leaves they are. Now, as a researcher, you're going to frame your hypothesis. I'll repeat it again. Imagine yourself, you're working as a nutritionist in National Zoo Park. One of your responsibility is feed the monkeys. But when it comes to feeding the monkeys, there are 5 types of leaves. A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, you are going to feed the monkeys, but you don't know which leaves they like it. So in order to understand that, you are going to test the theory out of it. You are going to frame the hypothesis. Now we have 3 hypotheses. Please let me know which is the correct hypothesis.
Sir, I suppose second one.
When
Is
offered
it
all
first,
five of
is it
somebody saying
first one? Sir?
first one is correct.
It's because safety is considered. So I feel
Okay. You're good. Okay. What about any other scholars? Any of you, please?
Sir, I think it will be B. And the second point, when offered
You're
all
saying-
5 types of leaf, the monkey will
Okay. You're saying the second one is the correct option, right? Okay. Yeah. We will see one more. Is there any other candidate? I'm not able to see any chart box here. If you can unmute yourself, that will be good.
Sir, first
Now-
option will be fine, sir.
So you're saying the first option is the correct one. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
there are 2 variables, I
Now-
suppose.
Now, if you look at the characteristics of the hypothesis should consist of 2 or 3 variables. Second one, it should state the relationship. Third one, it should be in the form of testable format. Now, the problem with the first one is that when offered all 5 types of leaves, the monkeys will preferentially eat bee leaves. That is fine. Okay. You are having some hypothesis. You are assuming it. But you are also giving conclusion because they can eat this safely in their natural habitat. As a researcher, if you are giving conclusion, there is no point of conducting research. As a researcher, you are framing hypothesis, you are going to test this particular hypothesis in the field. But if you are giving your own conclusion, what's the point of going to field again, right? So first one is not the correct option. Coming to the third one, when offered all 5 types of leaves, the monkeys will preferentially eat the type they like the best. Here, it is completely vague. You are saying that when you are going to offer all 5 of leaves, they are going to eat whichever they like. It means you're not assuming anything. You're not able to say they are going to eat A leaves, B leaves, C leaves. So it is not a hypothesis. Whereas when it comes to the second one, it says that they are going to eat preferentially feed on B leaves. Now it can be testable. One can verify it. Okay. So second one is the right way to frame the hypothesis. There are different methods how one can frame the hypothesis. Some scholars use if and then statement. Some scholars will use if and then statement. For example, here you can see here.
I think if anyone has some problem in the hypothesis testing why second one is correct, we can discuss it again if you wish. Pinky ma'am, are you clear why it is why we chose the second one as the best example of hypothesis?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. We have 2 more examples before discussing about various steps in conducting hypothesis. First grade girls will show better reading comprehension than first grade boys. Now, anybody can identify what are the variables in this particular hypothesis? Are there any variables in this particular hypothesis? First grade girls will show better reading comprehension than first grade boys.
reading comprehension is the variable.
Okay, one variable. Next one.
And,
Girls and boys.
The boys and girls.
Somebody's,
Gender.
so gender is another variable. So here, which is independent variable, which is dependent variable here?
Gender is independent.
Gender is independent. Okay. Reading comprehension is first dependent variable. Okay. So we have a number of variables, a number of hypotheses. So we can frame it. You can go through this particular slide later on. Okay. Hostelers use more alcohol than non-hostelers. So staying hostel is a independent variable. Using alcohol is a dependent variable, right? So we have so many other examples. Now, sources of hypothesis. How we generate hypothesis. So there are different ways one can generate the hypothesis. It can be based on previous research by going through the various literature reviews. or going through various theoretical understanding, theoretical concepts. You may have your own real experience, but in order to support your real experience, you might be using some supporting literature. Okay, so you might be using various articles to support your literature review. So there are different ways one can frame the hypothesis we have it. I just want to show one or two examples how scholars can decide whether they have to go with quantitative research or qualitative research. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, it's not that which method you're good at which method. It depends on the purpose, or it depends on the what kind of problem that you're able to address it. So based on the problem that you're trying to address, it will decide, it will help you to take the call whether you're going to come up with quantitative research or qualitative research. So there are two articles I brought it. One is on brain drain in Kenya. Now, if you look at this particular scholar, he explained what is the problem, what is the solution. And he also clearly mentioned that this qualitative case study, means the current case study, will explore the perceptions of professionals in Kenya about steward leadership as a strategy to elevate or reduce factors contributing to the brain drain among professionals in a lake basin region. The data to be gathered in the study may provide leaders with information relating to how they may address or mitigate factors contributing to the brain drain. So what I mean to say that by following these two articles, your purpose of the study tells you or help you to come up with what kind of research that you're going to have it. Okay. Now, hypothesis. There are two types of hypothesis we have it. One is null hypothesis. Second one is alternative hypothesis. I'm sure all of you might be knowing it. What is meant by alternative hypothesis? What is null hypothesis? When it comes to null hypothesis, generally we frame like that no statistical significant difference exists between the groups. Means you say that there is equal. There's no any kind of difference between the groups that you are trying to study. For example, if you're studying two vaccinations or two drugs, or two interventions, or two different types of teaching pedagogies, you're going to say that there is no any kind of statistical difference between these two interventions or pedagogies. Depends on the context that you're going to come up with. Whereas when it comes to alternative hypothesis, you say that there is a difference between these two, and you're going to come up with your results, study results you're going to have. So we have various examples of hypothesis. The exercise group and non-exercise group will not differ significantly on the level of cholesterol. So as a part of your null hypothesis, you are saying that they are equal in terms of level of cholesterol. Whether exercise group, non-exercise group will not differ, and you are going to test it as a part of your research, and you will come up with our findings in that case. Now, how to choose right statistical test based on your hypothesis? There are two types of tests we have it. I haven't discussed how to conduct the hypothesis test. I'll be talking about it. As a part of today's session, how one can choose the right statistical test. We all know that there are two types of statistical tests. One is descriptive statistics. Second one is inferential statistics. When I talk about descriptive statistics, one can see that central measures of central tendency. We have mean, mode, median. Basically, talk about an average. How many people belongs to this particular category? Or what is the median level? What is the mid value? We have it. Which is the most frequently repeated number, frequently repeated groups we have it. Okay. So basically, you're not here to generalize your research findings. As a part of descriptive research, you're trying to explain what you observed it. You're trying to explain what it is. You're not going to generalize your research findings with the rest of the population, right? So we also have quartile rank, percentile rank, counting frequencies, variance, standard deviation, range. So they're all part of descriptive research statistics we are going to have. On the other hand, we have inferential statistics. As a researcher, it is very clear that we can't collect the data from the entire population. So we'll take small sample, and studying this small sample, we try to generalize our findings with the rest of the population. So you're going to come up with some hypothesis testing. So we'll frame a hypothesis, and we'll test our results, and we'll come up with various results. So as a researcher, your purpose may be comparison. Maybe you want to look at association between variables. association between the groups, or you want to see cause and effect relationship between the variables, or you want to see relationship between the variables like correlation. We have regression analysis test. We have t-test, one sample t-test, independent sample t-test, paid sample t-test, one-way ANOVA. We have ANOVA family itself, we have it. So whatever it is, the main objective of inferential statistics is to generalize your research findings. You're going to compare your research findings with the rest of the population. Whereas when it comes to descriptive statistics, you're trying to explain what you have observed. You try to describe what is happening with respect to phenomena. So one can able to differentiate what is meant by descriptive statistics, what is meant by inferential statistics. Now, within the inferential statistics, we have two types of statistics: parametric statistics, non-parametric statistics. Now, each and every person may not be able to go with parametric statistics. When it comes to statistical test, parametric statistics are considered as more rigorous as compared with the non-parametric test. Now, how one can differentiate when one has to go with parametric tests, when one has to go with non-parametric test. As a part of parametric test, as a researcher, you are going to fulfill certain assumptions. You are going to fulfill certain criteria. Like, for example, your data must be distributed normally. I'm going to discuss about it. Tomorrow we are going to test it, normal distribution of the data. We are going to test with the help of JAMOVI whether our data is distributed normally or not. Okay. So we have certain statistical tests are available to tell whether our data is normally distributed or not, whether there is any kind of skewness, kurtosis, we have different tests are available. One can use descriptive statistics. One can use Sperry-Wilkie test. There are a number of tests are available. One can also use histogram to understand whether our data is distributed normally or not. That is point number one. Point number two, whether the researcher used sample, whether collected by using random sampling. Sometimes what happens is you might have collected data by using non-probability sampling techniques. So you may not be able to you may not be able to conduct parametric statistics. Third point. Point number one, whether data is distributed normally or not. Point number two, what kind of sampling that you have used it. Point number three, what is the sample size? Whether the sample that you have collected is good enough to conduct the parametric test. Point number four, every test is having certain variables. For example, I'm going to show you a couple of tables. For example, if you're having one dependent variable, by using this particular dependent variable, one can go with one sample t-test. We have one dependent variable, one independent variable. One can go with independent sample t-test. So there are, based on the type of the variable that you have it, you can decide what kind of test that you're going to choose that. So based on the certain assumptions, as a researcher, we are going to see, are we able to fulfill certain criteria? If you're not able to fulfill that criteria, we can't go with parametric test. So alternative is that for every parametric test, we have some alternative non-parametric test. For every parametric test, we have alternative non-parametric test. If you are violating, for example, my data is not distributed normally, I don't need to worry about it. I can go with non-parametric test. Okay. My sample size is small. I can go with non-parametric test. I have certain variables which are not allowing me to conduct parametric test. I can go with non-parametric test. Okay. So there are two types of tests: parametric test, non-parametric test. Simple points to understand whether what kind of data that you have it. Is it normally distributed or not? What kind of sampling that you have used for collecting the data? What kind of variables that you have it? What is the sample size? So based on these 3 to 4 categories, and more than 4 categories also, it depends on the test. For example, if we take correlation test or regression test, we also need to see linear relationship. We also need to see there should not be any kind of outliers. We also need to see homogeneity of variance test. So it depends on the test. For every test, it has own certain assumptions as a part of parametric test. But if you're not able to fulfill any of the assumptions, one need to worry about it. One can go with non-parametric test. We have it. Okay. Some of the assumptions are homogeneity of the variance. As a researcher, you are assuming that there is equal variance among the groups. Imagine that you have collected data from 3 groups. You are assuming that there is equal variance among the groups and you are going to test it out. So tomorrow I'm going to discuss about all the normality test, homogeneity of the variance test, and every test we are going to discuss with the help of the data set that we have. I'll show you one more slide with regard to how to choose the sample size, how to choose the right statistical technique. Before that, we need to have understanding about different levels of measurement. Different levels of measurement. As a researcher, you might be preparing 20 questions in your research tool or 100 questions in your research tool. But at the end of the day, as a part of quantitative research, you might be having 200 questions or 50 questions or 20 questions. But you are going to club them under 4 levels of measurement. They are nothing but nominal data, ordinal data, interval data, ratio data. I'm just repeating again. As a researcher, as a quantitative researcher, you might be designing the tool for collecting data from your respondents. It may be 20 questions, it may be 200 questions or 150 questions. But you are going to club under 4 levels of measurement. They are nothing but nominal data, means whatever the data that you are going to classify, whatever the data you're going to put in the form of specific labels, specific categories, like for example, gender, male, female, urban area, rural area, right? Public school, private school, eye color, brown color, black color. So if you're going to classify your data in the form of specific categories, specific labels, it is known as nominal data. Second one, we have ordinal data. In addition to naming the variables, you're also putting in the form of specific order, a specific ranking, specific positioning. For example, one of the most useful question, take any questionnaire, you'll find one important question, educational qualification, like UG, PG, PhD, or SSC, intermediate. So you're putting educational qualifications. For example, I can say that based on the total income, I can convert total income into ordinal scale, like low income, middle income, high income. Collecting data about your height. I'm collecting quantitative data from each one of you. I can scale it I can convert quantitative variables to categorical data, like medium height, low height, or tallest, whatever the manner I want to do it. First rank holder, second rank holder, third rank holder. If any kind of data, if I'm putting in the form of ranking, if I am putting in the form of positioning or in the form of ordering, that is known as ordinal data. We have it. Now, some of you can also add on it to that. When it comes to Likert scale, is it considered as an ordinal data or interval data? Likert scale?
It is actually ordinal data, sir.
Sorry?
It is ordinal actually, sir, but we in social science we use as internal.
Sir, you're not audible. Can you repeat the last statement? Last statement.
Sir, he is saying that it is considered as ordinal data.
It's considered the ordinal data.
Sir, it's actually an ordinal data, but since it's a standardized scale, you can consider it to be a scaled data.
Okay. Thank you, Divya. Thank you, Divya, and thank you, other professors. So it is very clear that there is some kind of debate is taking place and never-ending debate. Many of the scholars, they feel they consider this particular Likert scale data as both ordinal as well as interval data. So they'll consider it is both ordinal as well as interval data. So as a researcher, you can choose it. Depends on the context, how we are going to apply Likert scale as ordinal or interval data. We have it. Okay. Now, when it comes to the interval data, in addition to naming, ordering, we're also going to look at intervals between the variables. Intervals between the variables. So we are going to have some class intervals. We have it. We are going to have some variables. One can able to quantify it. You can also come up with some proportions. Whereas ratio data, naming, ordering, proportioning variables can also accommodate absolute zeros. I just brought a couple of images from the various scholars. I'm sure definitely this particular slide is going to help the those are at the initial stage of the research work, at least the PhD scholars. If you are dividing data in the form of labels like eye color, smartphone, transport, it can be nominal. If you have school grades, education level, or seniority level, that can be ordinal data. Next one, we have interval data and ratio data. So we have interval data is measured along the numerical scale that has equal intervals, adjusted values. Like here, one can say that IQ score 40 to 100. We have data in that scale. We have it. One can call it as interval data, and it can be continuous data as well. Whereas when it comes to ratio data, we are asking what is the height, weight. One can say that what is the income. So what is the staff number of children so that you have it? Okay. Ratio data is measured along with numerical scale that has equal distance between existing values and a true zero. So based on the type of the variable that you have it, one can able to choose that statistical test that can conduct it. Let's take, for example, so depends on the type of the variable that you have it. Nominal data and ordinal data known as categorical data. I'm just repeating again. Nominal data and ordinal data known as categorical data. Whereas when it comes to interval data, ratio data known as quantitative variables, or I can say that scale, it can be metric data. There are different names. Now imagine that I have one categorical data, one quantitative data. Okay. When it comes to the independent sample test, I have categorical data, one quantitative data. Categorical data is where you have two groups, like for example, gender, male, female. And I want to understand the performance of employee. Whether is there any difference between males and females in terms of their performance, annual performance. So annual performance quantitative variable, whereas categorical data is gender, male, female. If I have only two groups, I can go with independent sample test. In case, as a part of categorical data, if I have more than two variables, I'm going to use ANOVA test. I'm going to use ANOVA test in that case. So similarly, when it comes to the relationship between different variables, imagine that I have two quantitative variables, two continuous variables. I can go with regression test. I can go with correlation test. Okay. But I have one continuous variable. I have one independent variable.
This is
One
ratio
dependent
data, right?
variable. Hello?
Continuous is ratio data.
Continuous can be ratio or interval data.
Okay.
Continuous means it can be ratio or interval data, or I can say that quantitative data we will have it. Okay. As a part of this particular data set, we are going to use, one can do it independent linear relationship, regression test, correlation test, one can conduct it. Okay. For example, I have two categorical data. I can go with chi-square test. I have only one categorical data. I can go with chi-square test, goodness of fit test. So depends on the type of the variables, depends on the type of level of measurement that you have it. One can decide what kind of statistical text one can use it. I'm sure this particular slide is going to help you much further. For example, when it comes to simple linear regression, if you have one continuous variable, that is independent variable, and outcome variable is again continuous data. So one can go with simple linear regression. Means one independent variable, that is continuous data, one dependent variable, continuous data, one can go with simple linear regression. For example, what is the effect of income on longevity? Means as a researcher, I want to know the cause and effect relationship between income and longevity. The person who's having high income, what kind of longevity they have it, whether it's having any kind of impact on their quality of life, access to resources, access to basic quality of life, longevity life. Okay. So I can able to test it with the help of simple linear regression. But imagine that I have more than one independent variable, that is two continuous variables. I can go with multiple linear regression. So what I want to tell you here is that having understanding about levels of measurement, whether it is categorical data, whether it is a quantitative data, nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio, having knowledge about this type of the data or levels of measurement help us to take the call what kind of test one can go for it. Okay. Few more examples. For example, if you look at ANOVA, we have categorical data, but more than two groups. For example, I have group like gender, male, female, LGBT community. I have more than two groups. So that is categorical data. Continuous data, I'm looking at the performance of an employee. So if you look at the example here, what is the difference in average pain levels among post-surgical patients given 3 different painkillers? Now there are 3 different medicines, A, B, C. There are 3 different medicines. I just want to understand after the post-surgical patient, what kind of pain level they have on average. Pain levels is a quantitative data. It's a dependent variable. Whereas when it comes to painkillers, these are the categorical data I'm having. So I have more than 2 variables. I'm going to use ANOVA test. If you look at the independent sample test, what is the difference in average exam scores for students from 2 different schools? For example, we have CBSE board and state board, or international board, state board. So depends on public school, private school. We have 2 different groups, right? State board, central board, whatever you take it out. If they want to understand, are there any differences in terms of the exam score of the students? I have only 2 groups. So I can go with independent sample t-test we have. Correlation test, we have Pearson correlation. When it comes to non-parametric test, we have Spearman correlation, we have it. Okay. So for every test, we have alternative non-parametric test, we have it. So similarly, we have how to choose various statistical techniques as a part of the other tests like chi-square test. One can also go with various other statistics like Wilson sign rank test is part of non-parametric test. Kruskal Valley test is part of non-parametric test. Sign test is part of non-parametric test. We have it. Okay. Now, I just want to go for the question answer session. If there are any question and answers, so we can discuss it. Last 10 minutes.
Sir, can you explain usage of ANOVA again?
Sorry, madam?
Can you explain the usage of ANOVA? When do we
Usage of
apply
ANOVA. Yeah, usage of ANOVA. As a researcher, whenever you are trying to collect the data, whenever you want to test, if you have 2 variables, one is categorical data, where we have more than 2 groups. Let's take, for example, I have 3 different occupations, like the people, those are coming from doctors, engineers, and lawyers. I have 3 type of occupation, 3 types of professionals, doctors, engineers, and lawyers. I want to know what is the stress level, what kind of stress they have it. Now, stress level is a dependent variable. It is a quantitative data. Now, I want to understand whether the people belongs to doctors. Are they having high stress as compared with the lawyers? Or which category of the people are having high level of stress? In ANOVA test, we are going to conduct ANOVA when we have more than 2 groups. For example, if I have only 2 groups, like only doctors and lawyers, I'll go with independent sample t-test. But in this particular case, I have more than 2 variables, like doctors, lawyers, engineers. So in that case, I'll go with one-way ANOVA test. So we are going to do every test with the help of the data. Whatever I've shown right now, I have discussed all the tests. We are going to have sample data sets. We are going to practice hands-on practice with every test with the help of the data that we are going to carry out. Okay. So right now I want to discuss what is meant by hypothesis, how one can frame the hypothesis, what are the different types of hypothesis that you have it. And tomorrow's session, I'm going to discuss first 10 to 15 minutes. There are 5 steps in conducting hypothesis, framing, hypothesis testing of the data. So with the help of the data, we are going to understand. So I'm going to discuss with the help of the data in tomorrow's session, how one can fulfill the 5 stages of hypothesis form, framing and testing it. So today we try to understand what is independent variable, what is dependent variable, what are the different levels of measurement we have it, and how one can choose right statistical technique. Are there any questions in chat box?
Sir, one question from my side, sir.
Please, sir, please.
Sir, what is the criteria to put the hypothesis? How can we select the null hypothesis or alternative hypothesis? Is there any criteria to select these two hypotheses?
See, as a researcher, based on the existing theories, based on the existing literature, you are going to come up with testing the theory, right?
Yes,
You are
sir.
going to come up with the testing the theory. Now, at the part of your research conclusion, you are going to say that you are either rejecting the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis.
Yes, sir.
So if you look at the conclusion of any research thesis or research paper, you're not going to say that you are accepting the null hypothesis.
Yes.
You are going to say that rejecting the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Means you're not going to even talk about alternative hypothesis. Though you are going to test it, a research hypothesis, we have it. But conclusion part, we always give in the form of, we fail to reject the null hypothesis, we fail to accept the null hypothesis. That's what you are going to give the conclusion part. It means what it indicates. So the research hypothesis, the null hypothesis that you are framing it, that is the research you are going to come up with as a part of your research results in that case.
It means we should frame only null hypothesis.
No. You are going to frame both. See, you are going.
Both.
See, alternative hypothesis. Why you are framing it? So this is opposition. This is opposition you are putting in the form of. If it's not this one, this is going to be this one.
Okay.
For example, first one you are saying that there is no difference between male and female in terms of their performance, academic performance.
Yes.
Whereas as a part of research hypothesis, as a part of alternative hypothesis, you are going to frame that there is a significant difference between male and female. Now,
Yes,
your test results will tell you whether you're going to accept the, you're going to reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis.
Hmm.
You got the point, sir? So we can frame both. Will two categorical variables can be taken for framing hypothesis based on Likert scale? Arman Nisha, will two categorical variables can be taken for framing hypothesis based on Likert scale? As I mentioned it, you can consider Likert scale as ordinal data as well as interval data. There is a scale data. Now, one can also convert the Likert scale into categorical data. It's already, one can also quantify. One can also convert Likert scale into quantitative data as well. We can bring certain mean values. We are going to discuss it, how one can convert quantitative data into categorical data, how one can convert categorical data into quantitative. We are going to discuss in tomorrow coming sessions. Okay. The people, those are new to the research, those are PhD scholars. Was this session helpful you all? And the other scholars, if you feel free to add it, if you want to add something into the session, I'll be more happy to learn from each one of you.
If you do not wish to write or unmute yourself, you can always use the react button.
Okay. Coming to tomorrow's session, we'll be starting about steps in conducting hypothesis test, how one can frame the hypothesis. I mean, how one can test the hypothesis with the help of the 5 steps. And we are going to discuss about how to install the JAMOVI, how one can install the JAMOVI. I'll be sharing the links with you all. You can install it. In case if you are not able to install it, I'm going to discuss in tomorrow's session. And what is the interface of JAMOVI? I'm going to discuss in tomorrow's session. Okay. So this is all about for today. If there is anything, feel free to add it. You can ask me the questions.